Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has issued a warning, asserting on how there is a serious threat that remained at the Russian-occupied Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. He further said that Russia was technically ready to provoke a localized explosion at the facility. To talk more on this, on the repercussions and how imminent is the threat of a leakage at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, we have with us Dr. Malcolm Davis, Senior Analyst at the Australian Strategic Policy Institute. Thank you so much for joining us in WION, Dr. Malcolm.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Right. Now, Dr. Malcolm, the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant is the largest in Europe and has been under Russian occupation since Russia invaded Ukraine last year. Talk to us about how imminent is the threat of a localized explosion at the facility.
Well, as you say, the Russians have controlled this nuclear power plant for some time. They've certainly had adequate time to install demolition charges in key locations throughout the plant. So it would not be some sort of external attack with artillery fire or missiles. It would be an internal operation to destroy the plant from within and release radiation. In terms of imminency, it's hard to say. It really would depend on just how badly things go for the Russians in the coming weeks and months. The Ukrainian counteroffensive is proceeding, but it could be that the Russians decide to do this to try and essentially force the Ukrainians to back down.
Right, Dr. Malcolm. Now, Zelensky has made these claims of a serious threat at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. But talk to us about, are there any realistic chances of Russia actually attacking the nuclear power plant at the moment?
Well, as I said, it will depend on how this counteroffensive goes for the Ukrainians. If it goes well, if Putin's back is against the wall, he may do something like this. It's an option for him that is short of him essentially using tactical nuclear weapons directly. It gives him an option short of that. And it would likely be possibly to occur in coming weeks and months. But it shouldn't be discounted. It's a possibility. They've certainly had the opportunity to wire the plant for demolition, and certainly if they did it, it would release radiation right across Ukraine and probably well into Europe as well.
Dr. Malcolm, what is the scale of the threat? Just last month, IAEA Chief Rafael Grossi visited the nuclear power plant, the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant there, and he said that the situation is extremely grave and serious.
Well, certainly it is, and I think that the very fact that the Russians have been telling some of their people to evacuate is a cause for concern. If the Russians actually did this, if they destroyed the plant completely, then it would be certainly comparable in terms of the release of radiation to Chernobyl in 1986 or Fukushima in more recent times. And I think that you could see clouds of radiation billowing over, places over Europe and so forth. So I do think that this is a real concern. And I do think that what the Western countries are doing now are sending messages of deterrence against Russia to basically say, look, if you do this, this could very well be seen as an act of war against NATO if that radiation heads over NATO countries. And then if Article 5 is brought into play, an attack on one is an attack on all, so that could see a dramatic escalation in the war.
Right, Dr. Malcolm, talk to us about what can the international community do at the moment to avoid any explosion or any attack on the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant?
I think the best thing that they can do is send messages to Putin diplomatically, essentially trying to deter Putin and the Russians from doing this, and making it clear that if he does this, then you could very well have a situation where this is seen under NATO's charter as an act of war against NATO that would require Article 5, an attack on one as an attack on all. Certainly it would be an Article 4 situation where a security situation was causing an indirect threat to NATO, and you might have some of the easternmost states of NATO, like Poland and Romania and others, deciding that if NATO didn't act, that they would act on their own. And that certainly has been hinted at in past months. So I think that the best thing that we can do is to send a strong message to Putin do not do this, or if you do this, you will pay the price.
Right. There are also claims that the Russian forces are leaving the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant area. If it is true, then why is that?
It could be one of two things. Either they are preparing to detonate the plant, which is the big concern, as we've discussed, or that they're concerned that they're not going to be able to hold it, so therefore they're withdrawing. Obviously, we hope it's the second option, that they're simply withdrawing because they simply can't hold it any longer, given the Ukrainian advance in their counteroffensive. But it could be the former, in which case we have to be ready for the worst case scenario that the Russians actually do demolish the plant or cause an explosion at the plant that then releases radioactivity.
My last question to Dr. Malcolm before I let you go. Talk to us about Ukraine's counteroffensive. The United States has come out with a statement that says that the counteroffensive is going slower than what they had expected or desired. What is your assessment on it?
Yeah, I think that's correct. I think that we are seeing the Ukrainian counteroffensive moving forward, but it is moving forward more slowly than I think a lot of people would expect it. I think this is because the Ukrainian counteroffensive is running into very well-prepared Russian defensive lines. There's 3 defensive lines along the entire front for the Russians that they're very well dug in. There's large numbers of minefields, fortifications, heavy artillery concentrations. So the Ukrainians are moving slowly but deliberately. What they're trying to do is find weak points in those defensive lines that they can then penetrate through and exploit and bring follow-on forces through to then break out into the Russian rear. And they have yet to achieve that. But we are seeing just the beginning of this counteroffensive. I think you will see this extend through the northern summer into the autumn. So this could very well be going as we enter the northern winter. And then the counteroffensive, if it hasn't achieved a great deal at that point, well, then I think we would have to say the counteroffensive has failed. But I think it's more than likely that the Ukrainians will find weak points, they will break through and they'll exploit it, and the Russians could then be forced to retreat quite rapidly.
Absolutely, Dr. Malcolm. We'll have to wait and see how Ukraine's counteroffensive pans out further. But thank you so much for joining us on WION and sharing your insights with us on this. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.